Well, hey guys, it's me again. Thank you for coming back if you're coming back, and thank you for coming along if you're here for the first time. Today what I'm going to do is a very simple exercise, and hopefully we'll get something usable out at the end of it. I'm purely looking at using equipment and tools that you'd likely have if you've just bought a lathe. This could even be your very first project. You've never even spun a piece of wood before, so it's not going to have any complicated tools that you'd expect a professional or someone who's been turning for a long time to have floating around. This is purely things that you're going to have if you've got a lathe. All I'm going to use for this project, it's going to be a turning between centres project, is a live centre for the tailstock and a 1-inch drive centre for the headstock, and these actually came with this lathe when I purchased it, so no extra purchasing required. The only other thing you're going to need if for doing this is, if you've got a lathe, you're going to have some turning tools, and all I'm going to use is a 3/4 inch roughing gouge and a 3/8 inch beading and parting tool, and maybe a skew and maybe some other things if things go wrong, but I want to just use these two, hopefully. I'm also going to show and not edit out any mishaps, because you know, we are all human, we do get digging, we do have things go awry, and the good thing about turning is generally when this happens, which is generally right at the end when you think you're nearly done, is if something goes wrong you can generally turn it out and still produce a finished item at the end of it, because at the end of the day nobody knows what you were trying to do in the first place. Nobody knows the exact shape except you, and generally that's not the case. So I'd say that the only person that knows what shape the wood is the wood itself. So I'm going to set it all up for the next stage, and I'll show you how I get the wood on the lathe. Okay, so for this this first project, I don't want to ruin a big expensive piece of exotic hardwood. I'm literally just using a piece of log. It's just a split piece of log, so it's not square at all on any of the six sides. You could use a squared piece of timber, but you don't really have to for this project. In fact, the cheaper or freer that it is, then the better, in my opinion, because this may just end up in the bin. If you're using a set squared piece of timber, say this piece which I've got to hand, so the dimensions match, all you need to do to find the centre is mark from corner to corner, draw a straight line, corner to corner, join that line up, and that'll be your centre. And then all you need to do is do that on both ends, and it should spin fairly true. For this project though, we're just going to use a piece of split log. So with the drive, I'm just going to eyeball where I think roughly the centre is, and I think it's difficult to do so you can all see. It's going to be about there, and I'm just going to give that a little push in with the point and mark the centre. I'm now going to go over to the other end, and with the drive centre as well, roughly do the same. There we go. It's not far out. What's that? The next stage is I'm just going to tap in these teeth. These teeth on here are what's going to grip the wood in the headstock end. So I'm going to pop that in the. In fact, before I do that, I'm just going to. I don't know if you'll be able to see from there. Just with, I've got a little mallet here that I use. I turned, but there's nothing stopping you using a claw hammer or a ball peen hammer or a lump hammer or anything. You know, we're not trying to push it in. I'm just literally making. You can see, I can see there is a fourth one just there, but obviously the three main ones, because you're going into the end grain there, it goes in fairly simply. So now I'm going to pop that in the headstock end, and in the tailstock I'm going to use a live centre on this. And live centre basically means that this rotates with the piece of wood, rather than if it stayed still, friction would build up on the point there, and it would burn the end of the wood. But there's bearings inside here which allow it to spin. You see that? So pop that in the tailstock end, nice and secure, and they should be tight enough so you can actually pull that in there. So that's not going to go anywhere, and that's in there snug as well. Now I'm going to line up these marks that I've already made on the teeth of the the live centre, the drive centre, and I'm just going to tap the tailstock up. It's actually not meeting there. I can actually just about get my finger in there, so bring it in close but not touching, and I'm going to lock down the tailstock and then wind in. There's a handle that you can't see, but I can wind that in and then line up with that mark I made to start with until it engages, and then I'm going to crank it out. This may move back a little bit, just means I need to tighten the tailstock down a bit more. There we go, and get it nice and tight, so that will now spin. Now I've extended this, I'm just going to use the nut here and lock that in place, so that won't move. With the because I'm using an odd shaped piece of wood, I'm going to rotate it all the way around so that the tool rest isn't going to touch or hit. Obviously if I turn that on, it's just going to want to bang on the end there, so I bring the tool rest out slightly, and I'm actually going to put it square onto the centre line rather than parallel with the edge of the wood. So that'll do nicely. I'll bring that in, and I'm just going to raise the tool rest up slightly. Now I've moved it, I'll line it up again, lock that down just to bring it slightly closer in to the centre line horizontally with the timber. Right, one thing you won't be able to see is adjusting the speed. Now people say go faster with thinner diameters, slower with bigger diameters, and the rule of thumb is don't go too fast that it scares you. That would be my advice. The faster the wood is spinning, the easier it will cut, the cleaner it will cut with sharp tools, certainly. But you don't want it so fast that the whole thing's jiggling around and vibrating, and it spins out at you. So we've got it in nice and secure. I'm just going to double check the speed of the lathe running at, and then we should be ready to rough it out into a cylinder for you. Well, the steely-eyed ones amongst you have probably already noticed that this is a different piece of timber to the one that you've just seen me talking about. I filmed all the turning, and once again it's crashed, so that was the original piece that you saw just a second ago, and I'm going to end up with a little army of these things if I'm not careful. So I'm going to try and do it in about 5-minute clips and then edit it all together at the end, but fingers crossed we'll end up using this one piece of wood. Anyway, got the timber mounted. I'm going to use a 3/4 inch roughing gouge and turn it into a cylinder. Now, one thing I'll say to people, in my opinion, only ever use a roughing gouge when spindle turning between centres. Don't try and do it on a bowl blank, particularly a very, very large bowl blank, because these roughing gouges are made from a single flat bar that's bent into a U, and the tang that goes into the handle there tapers down and is very thin. If you compare that to a bowl gouge, which is even a small gouge like this one, it's done out of a solid round bar, and then the end is machined out of it. So the tang on a bowl gouge is much, much stronger. If you try and do a bowl gouge rough out with a roughing gouge, then you can put a lot of stress in the handle and on the tang, and in the best case it can bend your roughing gouge. Worst case, I guess potentially it could snap it over time. But yeah, spindle work for a roughing gouge. All I've done is I've double checked that the tool rest here is clear of the work, so that it spins freely, and then I'm just going to present the tool, the heel of the cutting edge, and lifting the handle up to rub the bevel, and then use the cutting action rather than go straight in and try and shear it off, which could potentially pull off big chips on this on these corners. So we'll get that spinning, and you can watch me turn the cylinder. Okay, so tool on the tool rest, present the edge, and then just lifting the handle, rotate that to the side, and then I can come out. I'm not trying to take off too much in any one go. slight cuts gently. And then by watching the shadow line on the opposite side of the axis, I can see how the tool's cutting. Obviously, as I'm taking these corners off, the timber is getting narrower in diameter, and hence moving away effectively from the tool rest. I'm just going to bring that in so I haven't got too much tool overhanging. So there's a reduction in the chance of the tool getting caught between the rest and the timber, and also less vibration and more support for me. Rubbing my index finger here across the back of the tool rest gives me a better guide. Now, I'm not going to worry too much about getting a perfect cylinder or B a smooth cut at this stage. I just want it balanced and round. Turn that off and give it a little check. Still got a flat spot on here and on the other side as well because it was slightly rectangular. I'll spin that down into a cylinder. Take off those flat edges. I think this little feather's going to end up being tall and skinny like me. There we go, a little bit of flat edge on there to run, so I'll get that off. There we go, yeah, I'm not even going to bother too much about these ends. Looks a bit like a dog's bone at the moment, but I'm only going to end up working in the centre here, and this is all going to be waste, so there's no point turning that into chippings. It just gives me more to clean up in a second. So I'm going to stop the video and do the next clip. Okay, well that last bit's saved, so we can move on to the next stage. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to try and replicate this roughly. So by just marking the points here where I've got a transition, that gives me a rough idea of where to make the marks. You don't have to do that, it's just because I'm going to make an attempt at trying to get it vaguely similar to this first piece. So I'm going to swap over to the beading and parting tool now. I'm going to use it in two ways. One a bit like a skew, to mark the grooves for these points, and also as a conventional parting tool to make the diameter changes. And then I'm going to use it as a beading tool by just rotating the tool one way or the other, and you'll see that. So I'm going to try and do a couple of beads, see how we're doing for time, and then re-record the bits as we need to. Now, just before I apply, I don't know if you can see where those little dashes I made are spinning. I can see them in the shadow lines. I'm just going to present the pencil just very lightly on the wood, more so you can see them. So that gives me a rough idea. Now, using the V point on its triangular side, going to lift the handle up and make a small groove at each of those transition points. So that'll become the brim of his hat, top of his hat, top of his head, the bottom of the hat, and then the 3 snowballs on the head. I think what I'll do is I'll make the head slightly smaller on this one. So I'm going to present the bevel. We'll make his head about that round, I think. Now as I'm bringing this carding tool in, I'm watching the tail edge to see where the cut brings in. I'm also going to just start to round over this transition in the middle here. So just using the point at a slight angle, just fly the point, and then I'm going to roll the tool over like that. And hopefully when it ends up at that point, I should be in line there. Lifting the hand, lifting the handle, bring it in, and then do the same the other way around. You might find, I certainly do, that I go better one way, generally this way, than I do trying to rotate around the other way. I don't know why. A lot of it's muscle memory. I don't pretend to be an expert. It seems that one way is more comfortable than the other. You could actually use a spindle gouge for this. It's a slightly different technique. When I was first shown this, it was actually a skew chisel exercise, using a skew chisel in exactly the same way, rolling it over, it's good to be able to use the tools you've got in a way. You've got a blunt skew chisel and you need to do a bead, or you've got a blunt beading tool and you've got a sharp skew chisel, you can still carry on the project. Also saves time putting down tools. You're making a lot of something, doing all the same tools, sharpen it, you've got your jig set up, saves a lot of time. Having to worry about hunting around for that tool, going to sharpen it. It just increases the skill profile, makes you more confident with each of the tools. Let's check the video, seems to be recording still. I'm not going to go for perfect spherical beads, they're more blobs of snow. Ask any small boy or girl when they're building their snowman, no geometric shapes in sight. This is exactly the same principle, exactly the same technique that you could use for turning table legs, chair legs, staircase spindles. Yeah, it's a very finials for top of a birdhouse or something. Might seem like a very simple, boring project, but it's got applications in very numerous turning and just general woodworking projects as well. So turning out a table or something. Right, I'm going to bring that in at a slight angle so I undercut his head a bit, and then I'll try and get that. I don't want it going in too far. I want to give the impression that the hat's sitting over his head, not perched on top of a snowball, because obviously hat's got a hole in it. Well, it's not happening, so we can have it sitting on top of his head then. I'll get in there and bring that round. Let's have a quick check of this. Now these little feathered edges, these are because the beads aren't meeting at the same point. So I think I need to go in from this side to pull those out slightly. There we go, I should have pulled those out. Quite happy with the shape of his head, just round that middle centre ball out. Completely eyeballing these radiuses. I don't want it to be perfectly spherical. And where I've got these flat spots and creases, I can always go in afterwards with a bit of sandpaper. To blend those across. Okay, I've got quite a few rough bits on the top of the beads, but I think we'll get away with the sandpaper on those. I'm quite happy with those beads. Like I said, I'm not an expert or a professional or looking at that even particularly very good, but that'll come out with sandpaper. So I'm going to stop again and we'll work on with the hat.